Hello and welcome to another episode of Software Should Be Free. Today I am joined by David Gisbey, who I worked with at the Department for Education. And the reason I wanted to get David on is because David is a newer developer, although not so new to the world of work. And in theory, I ended up mentoring David, and I wanted to have a bit of a retrospective on that. So hello, David.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. So let's jump straight in. So a lot of developers come straight out of uni and go straight into, like, maybe they do computer science or something like that. And they come into the place of work with new technical skills. And if they're anything like me, thinking they can do everything and they don't need to know anything from anyone, your path's a little bit different and probably getting more common these days. So you've had some kind of career before you switched over to be a programmer like me. So I was wondering if you could, I've heard a bit of this story before, but even for my benefit, it'd be quite good to hear a bit about your journey and like what brought you to decide to cross-train as a developer.
Sure. So I took a very roundabout route for sure to become a dev. I actually left school when I was pretty young. I was like 16. Got a full-time job working in a benefit delivery center, which was, my job was literally to call people up and tell them they wouldn't be getting their benefit, and it was brutal. It was an awful job. And then I left that. I traveled a bit, did the sort of every minimum wage job under the sun until I was about 21. And then I decided I wanted to go to uni. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I picked history because I liked it. So I went off to Bristol and did that, and that was really good fun. And then finished that and thought, God, I don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to be a historian. The thought of doing a master's was not very appealing to me. Essay writing is not something I enjoy. And then I basically saw a job at the Department for Education online and thought, oh, why not? So I went for it. It was a really interesting job. I quite liked it to begin with because we were quite understaffed, and it allowed me to take on some quite challenging work and quite varied work. So I was doing sort of some admin-y type stuff, but a lot of project management and various things. And while I was working there was actually a opportunity. They were running a cross department pilot scheme to retrain civil servants as developers. So if you could somehow have got paid for playing games, I would have made good money off it. I don't come from never having touched a computer, played a lot of games and stuff, but I wasn't this sort of person. I could do some things with a computer, but I definitely wasn't like I know you were, where you were taking things apart from being young and figured out how it worked. But yeah, I just saw the opportunity and thought, well, I'm just going to give it a go and see if I like it. So I did some stuff online and quite enjoyed it. And then I sort of just applied, and before I knew it, I was sort of onto this scheme and had the opportunity to go away and do a coding boot camp and everything like that. So it was really lucky, really. I never looked really at the internet. Hopefully no one's listening from the DFE. But yeah, I don't ever look at the internet, and I just happened to see it on there. It wasn't, so I was working in Cambridge at the time, and it was only publicised in London, Coventry or Manchester, because that was where you had to go. Mm-hmm. So yeah, stumbled across it very luckily.
What was your entrance into the civil service like? So my first job of computing was I saw a index card in the career centre at university and wandered into a local department, and they went, "Oh, you'll be fine," and here you are, here's a server. Really kind of informal, not much expectation, not much pay. I understand that the civil service entry is fairly rigorous, presumably for any job. What was that like, and what were you thinking you were going to get out of that job when you joined it?
God, well, I guess education, without being too high moral, nonsense. But like, it was something that I do feel like fairly passionately about. I think most people that work in DFE, there's a lot of ex-teachers and stuff that I think most people do feel passionate about it. In reality, my dad's a civil servant. Like, I knew the DFE was like a good department to join, and there would be like good room for progression. It's a bit more of like a policy-driven department, so I thought like maybe that would be like I could work my way into doing something like that, and that would be more interesting than perhaps being in sort of a more operational delivery focused role, which is a very catch-all term for frontline. The frontline difficult jobs, which are like chronically underpaid in the civil service, unfortunately, in my opinion. And yeah, like I would love to pretend that it was some massive decision to apply for that job, but I was applying for a lot at that point because I was out of uni, didn't really know what to do. So it was more just a case of like, oh, that looks interesting, I'll apply, rather than concerted effort. I thought, when I left uni, I was thinking of doing all sorts. Like, thank God I didn't, but I was thinking about going into finance or like accountancy for a while. And like, I know what I'm like, and I really like being a dev, and I work pretty hard for me. Which, if my 18-year-old self could see how hard I work now, they'd be like very shocked. But it's because I enjoy it. It's because I really enjoy it, so it doesn't feel like work. Whereas if I was tried to be an accountant, I just know I wouldn't make it, or I would hate it so much that my life would be miserable, But I was looking for all sorts. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I know a lot of people sort of have that thing, not a lot, but some people, they're like, oh, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be like paramedic or a firefighter or in the army or whatever. And I just never really knew.
Yeah, and some people follow that track and get to their final qualifications and get their job and realize they didn't like it after all.
So I've taken the approach of trying lots of different things and disliked most of them, and then finally stumbled into something that I really enjoyed. So quite lucky.
So what was so you were in the civil service for quite a while before you cross-trained, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in for a couple of years, and I also was in for a year when I was sort of 18 to 19. Right. So it wasn't like a new experience joining in digital at all. Different. I think what's funny is sort of digital colleagues are often known for sort of being a bit like acronym heavy and like all these like high theory concepts and stuff, and I actually found it the opposite. I think that digital at least used the like cleanest, clearest language out of any place in the civil service I've worked. There are way less acronyms, and it's like I guess it's quite technical, and it's very different to the rest of the civil service, but I actually think it's really easy to work in digital as a non-technical colleague compared to like working. When I joined in Cambridge, they literally gave me a 3-page list of acronyms I had to like learn. It's mad.
So were you like actively kind of done with the previous career journey, or was it just that chance that you happened to see something and thought it was interesting?
I was definitely ready to move to a new role. Like I wasn't. So the basically in the previous role, the team filled out. So it was meant to be 9 people, but for a long time it was about 5. So I got to pick up lots and lots of interesting work, like I said earlier, and that came to a complete halt. Once the team filled out, I basically was doing all the like really boring admin-y type stuff that no one else really, well, maybe that's not fair, but I guess that is what the expectation when you are at the entry level. So I was proactively looking for either to move up a grade to the next step, or something else in general. But it's funny, I had done like a tiny bit of looking into learning some, teaching myself to code a little bit, and then I saw that a few weeks later, so it was quite ideal, really.
You mentioned like gaming being a big part of your background, as it was for me over the years, and I certainly never considered that to be a route to programming. Like, I didn't get into game modification or anything like that, like some people did. So, what kind of, like, you mentioned that you'd looked into it a bit, but like, what was your exposure to like what programming was and whether it was interesting or not at that point?
Extremely minimal. Like it was a case of just going online. I remember I Googled like, what's the best way to teach yourself to code, and I remember it's the classic one that you see on people's CVs who don't have much experience, and I think we're all Googling the same thing because they will talk about that CS50 course on that Harvard provide. It's like they talk about Scratch, and it's funny. I was talking to I visited a friend not recently, but a few months ago, and I was asking him about what they learn at school, and he was talking to me about Scratch, and that was the first thing I saw on that. And it's really just like a series of lectures which teach you a little bit about like entry-level computer science and a bit about programming, and then I just had like a little play around. I managed to find my way onto what's it called, Code Academy.
Right.
So I had it's one of the, you can do both, but there's like free courses. So the first thing I looked into, I think it was Python I'd looked at.
Did
but it was extreme
at the time?
It was extreme. And it was just, I Googled it and it was like, people were talking about it, it was literally a case of just like, oh, I get lots of people using Python, I guess I'll have a look at Python. It's like, I don't think there's I might be wrong, but I think that programming in general is quite a steep entry level, like in terms of, particularly those courses, they go from sort of assigning, A equals 10, B equals 20, A equals like B, what is that, to iterating across the arrays and lambdas and all sorts of stuff like really, really quickly. And I think it's quite difficult to get into programming unless you really have time to sit down and spend doing it. It's hard when you're juggling a full-time job and you're commuting and you're doing all these other things. So I don't think I could have done it without going to a boot camp.
I guess that's some consolation for anyone who's out there thinking, why is this so damn hard? It is actually quite a learning curve. Like, I'm reminded when I talk to people who know less about it than I do, like just how much I take for granted in terms of knowledge, like all the things that I know. So do you like, I'm so far down the road now, like occasionally people talk to me who aren't programmers who are kind of interested, and I just don't really know what to recommend. So given that you're a bit closer to that early stage, and obviously times have changed a lot since I started, have you got any like recommendations for people that you generally hand out if someone's sort of interested as a way of getting started?
So one of my friends is trying to retrain, like he's trying to self-teach himself, self-teach, become self-taught. And I guess the first thing I would tell them to do is to unfortunately, you kind of just have to do one of those courses to teach you the basic. There are some quite good like Udemy courses that I remember picking up quite early on. So one thing I did was I think it's called like the Complete SQL Boot Camp or something like that. I think SQL is a good one to have a little go at because it's quite simple, I think, in comparison to trying to pick up something like Ruby straight away. I think that if you enjoy like building some queries and you start learning about subqueries and like various other things, like I think if you enjoy that, you'll probably enjoy programming in general. I think really try and build something that you find interesting as soon as you're capable is probably the way to go. So my friend, he was talking about, I quite fancy doing like building something that I might use. So it was to do with like scraping sports scores and getting updates and stuff like that. So like do something like that, I would say. Like, if I'm being completely honest, if you can go to a boot camp, I would probably go if you can afford it, but they're really expensive. So, and you have to, like, realistically, you have to quit your job to go. So,
right, doubly expensive.
Yeah.
So,
Code
Academy.
I mean, it would have been 9,000.
Gosh,
That's a lot of money.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to really know
Plus
you
your
want it.
salary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you can get a long way before committing to that. Like, I think you can be
Yeah.
writing basic programs and
Yeah, I think so.
new things before you commit to something like that, because you might not like it. I
Yeah, you
think everyone
definitely
did.
should know if you're going to like it or not. So I was quite lucky because I actually was enjoying it, but because I didn't have to pay for it, there was no, and I was still getting full salary. There was no risk, really. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's
could have
perfect.
just decided after 6 months, like, oh, I don't really like this, and they had to keep my job open. So there was
Yeah.
absolutely zero risk for me, which made it a lot easier.
Yeah, excellent first steps from the department, I have to say.
Yeah, I think so.
So just to cover over those resources, so it was Code Academy and Udemy. So pick some courses, maybe SQL would be a good starting point. As soon as you can, try and build something that works. I definitely
think
second
so.
that. That was probably one of my big things back at uni. We did. So I didn't do computer science. I did cybernetics. But as part of that, we went over to the computer science department, did some of their basic courses, and some of that was sat around with some postgrads who helped us like tap away and get something to work in Delphi. And like the gap between I've written all of these letters on screen and I don't understand and it's not working, to oh my god, it works even though it's a mess, is a big reward in its own right, I think.
Definitely. I think that one big thing for me was, even though, to be honest, like I don't have too much interest in being like a full front end dev, was actually doing something and I could like change some code and see the effect on the screen. Like, that was really good for me. I found that really motivating when I got to that point. So I think finding something that interests you and motivates you is the most important thing. And those courses, they really cover things in very brief detail. So take what you learn there and then go build something with it. Like, use iterating across an array to like actually do something, like whatever it might be, or use loops to build something, like actually go do it. Don't just like write the little bit of code that gets you past that tick box thing on that course. You actually go and write everything out. Like really, really thoroughly like learn the syntax early on.
I still like to have a project to work on. Like, I've been learning Golang, as you know, and they've got a really nice tutorial to get you up to the speed of the basics. So I went through that start to finish. Because I got a Pluralsight subscription, I watched a couple of their videos at high speed just to get an overview. But then straight into building this Schema Explorer thing that I was working on, and really driving all the other learning off the back of that. Like, what did I need to know to do that particular thing? And not really worrying about perfecting it or making the architecture great or anything like that, just bashing away at building something. And you can always come back and learn architecture, learn like proper computer science principles. I worked with someone for quite a long time who came through a less traditional path. Like, they came through finance and got into macros in Excel and thought that was kind of interesting. And they worried for ages that I kind of knew something that they didn't, because I'd been through a slightly more formal education. But there's not anything massive in there that you can't. I mean, a lot of it you can just go and look up on Wikipedia, like the complexity, algorithm complexity stuff that I can't remember half of, the O to the N and what have you.
I think that a lot of developers have quite bad imposter syndrome, particularly developers that don't come from a computer science background, because you always think, oh, I'm missing out on, this secret knowledge that these, was taught at university or whatever. Like, I know I feel like that way sometimes. I think it's very common.
Like, and it's getting worse in a way, in that as the technology proliferates at speed, like, it's because there's so many developers. For every 100 developers, one of them is writing a new way of doing something.
I think also it's really not helped by a lot of the job adverts where like they're saying, oh, I want 17 years experience for a junior dev and like stuff like this, and you see those things, and obviously you know better. And I'm starting to know better now that they're really just writing these things, and in reality they're never going to get them. But it can be very off-putting to begin with, for sure.
I think I don't entirely know what goes into those. My guess is like they've got no reason not to just put down a shopping list of all the things they would like, and you can read it the wrong way. And it's, at the end of the day, it's a market. Like, either they're going to get in front of all the people they can, and there'll be a spectrum of people with different skills and like different.
But you are going to put people off. You're going to put people off applying, though. That definitely could happen. You could lose out on some good people.
Well, for me, the skills list put me off because it's
Yeah.
not very interesting. It's like it doesn't tell me anything about like why that company is one to care about. Like Department for Education's got quite a good story. Like, you know, you're helping the next generation. I mean, that's quite compelling, and it's not a particularly controversial department. It's not like the MOD or something where you might, you know, be all in with that or never want to go near it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that education is a bad thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. Although, if you have to do it yourself with your children during, you know, lockdown, then you might find it less positive an experience. But certainly, everyone's going to appreciate the teachers more. That's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully. So, I think it's worth spending a bit of time talking about the Makers Academy that you went through. So, so to just put a bit of context in for anyone who doesn't know, the Department for Education was a little bit late to the party on the GDS style of running projects and digital things. So that when I arrived, it was mostly a gang of contractors pulled in for their experience and their ability to just build something. But there has been since then a good effort to build long-term capacity, build in-house skills. And David was kind of the guinea pig as the first person to be internally trained as a civil servant to become somebody who can hold us contractor a lot to account by having interests aligned. So if I remember rightly, so I joined April a couple of years ago, and then we were working on a very early prototype of the project we were working on. And then just before Christmas, like maybe November time, I think you, David, made a brief appearance in the office. We got introduced as that you were about to go and do the academy. So is that correct?
Yeah. So I think it was like mid-September or late September for a month. The idea was that I came in and sort of met the team and in reality, it was quite tricky because I was trying to like teach myself the basics, and I had quite a lot of work to do for the course. Like they had a pre-course section, but yeah, it was nice to come in and sort of see what was going on. So that was for 4 weeks, and then I went off between November and February to Makers. It was a interesting experience for sure. It was very different to my previous role coming into the team.
It was definitely good to have met you before you joined for real after the training, because it started to build that relationship. Because if you imagine it from the point of view of the team, like some DFE person has gone off and trained and is suddenly parachuted into the team, whereas to have seen you and met you and got to know you a little bit beforehand, that was definitely very valuable. So that when you came back, it's like, okay, it's you're back, but with some more skills. So that was good. So just from my point of view, like when you arrived, I have to say my impression of like the breadth of knowledge and the depth of knowledge that you got from that, I was very impressed. Because a lot of learning to be a programmer can be skewed one way or the other towards like deep theoretical without the practical experience, or really practical without really any underpinnings below that. And obviously there's only so much you can cram into that much time. But like the ability to, you know, work practically on a project, but also, you know, some understandings of what different data types and different reasons for things are. That certainly came across like, straight away when you arrived, that you had that, even though you hadn't done commercial projects at that point. So what was your kind of experience going through that? I know it's hard work.
Yeah, I think it was like a great experience, and I think the boot camp was about as good as you could make like a 12-week experience. Like there's only so much you can do, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I think they do a really good job actually of, like you say, like balancing out practical skills that you're going to use and having like some understanding of like some of the more theoretical stuff. Like they do a week on algorithms, and they have you sort of make your own shuffle and sort and, you know, all that type of stuff, and then teach you a bit about memory and stuff like that. But it is probably more skewed towards the practical things. So they're sort of like having you TDD and all this stuff. I know like TDD can be a bit of a like controversial topic. Some people love it, some hate it, but like, you know, I think it's good to know it anyway, even if it's not your thing. But yeah, I think it was a really good experience. It was incredibly tiring, actually, I'll say, because it's quite, now I can sit down, I think probably like you, and if you've got your headphones on and you're like in the zone, you can write code for a pretty long time because you're kind of used to it. It's not
too long.
too bad, but you should take more. Probably both of us could do it, taking more breaks. But it's a very new experience to be doing, and you're like having to think really hard about everything constantly. The things that now come obviously quite naturally are everything is a battle. So I think it's a really good experience. It gives you pretty good exposure. You do all sorts there. Like, I remember they had us use the Guardian API to like. And like week 4 to create a sort of news feed and all sorts. So there's a lot of like, and then you do manipulating the DOM and like a little bit of everything. And then you spend like the last 4 weeks working in the language you're going to come back in. So I did Rails for the last 4 weeks, and I certainly I think it still took me a good couple of months or 3 months of coming back to what I would say is like not be a sort of burden, might not be a very nice way of putting it, but I would say I slowed the team probably a little bit for a while, but I think I got up to speed a lot quicker having done that than I would have if I'd just been like dumped on the team with little knowledge and had to use a lot more of everyone's time.
I think
it's a nice environment.
Up to speed quicker than that. I mean, it's also worth mentioning like that particular team at that time. Very, very high performing team. You know, if you'd been dropped into the average team, to be like net positive, it probably would have been a lot quicker.
I also think that the main difference of coming back was that the sort of things you're building there, you're building new things regularly. So it's never getting to that like complexity level, or the code base is always quite small. And then I remember coming back and seeing the code base and just thinking like, how am I possibly going to ever get to, you know, grips with this? And in reality, like when I moved like, from one team to another in the DFE, and it was so much easier. Obviously I had a lot more experience then and things like that. But trying to learn all these like quite difficult concepts while also learning a new code base was really tricky. But fortunately I had a lot of support. So that helped a lot.
Yeah. So the like when you say you had a lot of support, like obviously that's really important to you. Like what kind of form did that show up in with the team? So
well, first of all, like you were assigned to mentor me directly, which it meant like I always had someone to go to, and I didn't ever have to worry that I would be taking up I mean, I still probably did worry a bit about that, but I think that's probably natural. But I didn't have to worry too much about taking up lots of someone's time. And beyond like you, if you weren't around to help me, everyone on the team was incredibly supportive. I think it's DFE has actually like a really good culture. I think that they've done a really good job of hiring the right contractors who are not only like highly skilled and deliver a lot, but they're also like really nice to work with, really friendly, and like proactively help you get better. They don't like, you know, it's not, I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, Sal or someone, you know, will be sitting next to me and they'll see I'm struggling and they'll come over, you know, poke their head in and be like, "Oh, do you want a hand with that?" That's like, I know, having spoken to other people, they did not have particularly great experiences going back. And I think I really don't think I would have progressed I think I when I look at how good I was when I came back to how good I am now, I think that most of that comes from the fact that I had such a supportive team that were like always willing to help. If I'd just had to teach myself everything, I think I'd have really struggled, like really, really struggled.
Yeah, and that's that was definitely not the team, especially bending over for you particularly, because even with a bunch of experienced people, like we all have our particular areas that we know better or worse. And yeah, that team would, without any judgment, always pitch in and help and discuss. Yeah, very impressive. I'd like to know what their magic secret is for filtering and hiring for a team like that, because that's gold. And that's definitely something I'll take with me as a lesson from that place, is like, when you're hiring, you really, if you can hire not just from technical capability, but also for like that kind of attitude, then you're just going to have a much better time of it. You'll keep people for much longer because it's a much more pleasant environment to work in, and people get up to speed quicker.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so you finished the academy, and really quite a good set of skills off the back of that. So do you want to talk a bit more about like actually diving into that new code base on day one? Because I'm kind of interested in that experience. Like, if I remember rightly, we approached it with pairing, as the team often does. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think to begin with, I largely paired with you and sometimes Misha. I think that you're possibly over exaggerating or misremembering my skill level. I think it was not great, actually. I don't think I was speaking to someone about this recently, because DFE have sent a bunch of other new people to makers, and one of the people I manage now was saying, they're finding it really hard, and without trying to sound like a bit arrogant, like school was always quite easy for me and things like that, and I didn't really struggle, and I really struggled, like really struggled with learning to program. And he's having the same experience, and he was saying, I'm really glad that you know that you can relate to this, because I really found it hard. I've had to work really hard at makers, and I was still, I would say, in the bottom third in skill, I would say, when I came back. And I would say the first month or 6 weeks, I was trying to just bore you to, or like barrage you to death with questions, just like asking questions over and over and over if I didn't understand. And I think like that is, I know you actually proactively spoke to James, didn't you? I think, and said, you'd be interested in doing some mentoring. And it was really lucky that I got someone that was happy for me to ask stupid questions over and over, or what seem like stupid questions that potentially aren't.
I think they approached me, but on the basis of like just the way I am, in terms of like, I'm always bothering people with like things I've learned, whether they want to know it or not, or better ways of doing things. So yeah, I think they'd seen that like I like to communicate and like share my knowledge and spend the time as much on that as cranking out the thing that needs to be done. And also I wasn't in the tech lead position, which is like the tech lead position, as you've seen, is always
extremely busy,
far too busy. They just have to do the top 3 things out of their 100 on any given day. So it's, if to put mentoring on that would be difficult, because there are some things that just have to be dealt with to keep the team running. So to do mentoring as well, you'd be left just okay, I'll have to wait until tomorrow before I can find out this little nugget of information. So yeah, I think they approached me and said, would you be up for doing mentoring? And I wasn't ever actually that clear how formal it was, but it was like, yeah, fine.
Yeah, I think it was all quite informal, isn't it? But I don't know, I think maybe that works for some people and not for other people. I found it works really well for me.
Yeah, me too.
To have these fairly informal things, because I think it allows you to do as much or as little as you need at the time. So I sort of touched on this before, but I'm having to design some sort of like internal mentoring thing right now, and it's that case, isn't it, of like how light touch do you make it, how prescriptive do you make it, what might be right for me might not be right for other people. So I think it's probably do the old user research and speak to everyone and see what they think. But
it sounds like one of the key things was as much just knowing that you had one person that it was always okay to interrupt and ask questions.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think that's like so important, because there's no point sitting there being stuck for hours, because it might be something, you know, particularly early on, it might be something really stupid that you've not done, you know, like it, and yeah, you know, I could always come to you, but you say that tech leads are busy and things like that, but Misha always gave me a lot of time. You know, he was very generous with his time, very generous, and he still now is. I recently had to do another tech test with him, and afterwards he gave me amazing feedback and was like, "Oh, okay, we should structure this more. I'm going to set you some goals." And he was like, "Get a Raspberry Pi, do all like this stuff," and you know, like he gave me really, really great structured feedback and things that I know will help me improve. So, excellent. He's an amazing person and tech lead.
Respect.
But yeah, I think having someone to go to and not feeling like you can't go speak to someone is so important. It makes you feel a lot more comfortable as well early on, knowing that you've got that.
Good. Yeah. So like not being at sea or stuck in a corner. Like I've experienced that myself. Like being on a team where they're not the kind of great communicators that this team is. They're busy doing their own thing. They perhaps resent slightly being interrupted, and you know, you get stuck on something and you're like, can I be bothered to deal with these people when they don't really want to talk to me? It's not even a question of level. It's just, you know, a team being a good, helpful team that wants to keep everyone up to speed. Yeah, none of my particular teams spring to mind, obviously, but I definitely have memories of that.
I mean, I know it's definitely the case for a lot of people who I knew who went back after Makers that had really negative experiences. People were very unhelpful and also not interested in teaching them because they saw it as like a direct competition. You know, I was like, well, I teach this person, they're going to get rid of me, you know, type thing, which maybe that's, I don't really ever feel like that's the way in DFE digital, but maybe. No, I really don't think people feel that way.
Yeah, everyone's got that abundance mentality, haven't they?
Yeah, like, I think so.
We can share. We're not trying to slice up what's left of a pie.
No.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, I want to focus primarily on the mentoring thing as a subject today, because I think there's quite a lot to learn, like for everyone listening, and also for myself personally, because we've now had quite a long relationship, like slightly beyond the end of the contract, and you know, I've tried to walk that line between being unhelpful versus showing off. Like what areas it's helpful to hold forth with, like technical, practical, like general, my experience of what it's like as a career and like where you could go. Now, I want you to be like absolutely blunt in what you got value out of, what you didn't, what you like, what you'd rather I didn't do. Like I don't have any particular ego attached to any of this stuff, and I think it would be good for me and everyone else to learn from what really has worked over the last year and a half plus.
Yeah.
How you want to cover that?
Yeah, I think that I guess the way you've mentored me as time's gone on has changed. So I think to begin with, it was much more technically focused. So you were directly teaching me how to, you know, how to code, and like how, you know, like a lot of the fairly like basic concepts probably still at that point.
Increasing like the breadth of Rails knowledge, like, you can use this particular feature of Rails. This is where you've made a little mistake there, or go look this up. This is how you do
and not just Rails, actually, like all sorts, like just general, like lots of little computer science things as well, because you have like a very, I think like where one of your biggest strengths is just you have this insane breadth of knowledge about like so many things, like you have ridiculous knowledge on. So
if only they did pub quizzes on it, eh?
Oh, I know. Yeah, you would win hands down. Like, you know so much about so many things. But yeah, like as time went on, I think that the way that you've like the things you've mentored me on have changed a lot. And I think that what I've learned most from you, probably for the best part of like 9 months, I guess. When did I move to? But probably from like even before I left Find, like where I feel like I've got the most knowledge gained from you has been the more business related things, because you actually have a lot of experience on all sorts, like but I think you've taught me like to know my worth a bit more, and like because you
don't tell them
pushed, but I'm still there, but I've like pushed for things a lot harder because you like I don't know what the right word is, but basically just let me know
the bigger picture a little bit. Like showing you what the market looks like, because like exactly. And I think this is of benefit to the Department for Education, because one of the things I said to you is like, don't just grumble and then leave. Like they're learning to run this organization themselves. Like be a representative of the market and say, look, this is my value in the market, and this is what you need to keep people like me, like whether you stay or not. If they want to build this capability, then if they undervalue people consistently, then they're going to wonder why they constantly have churn. So by being really communicative, like you can actually help them.
Yeah, I think at the moment that they're fine because they have a lot of junior staff, particularly developers. There's a lot of junior devs, and they have a really great culture. So it's a really nice, fun place to work.
They also need to be aware of what it's like out there, because I mean, you know, at the end of the day, they're not all programmers. Like us as programmers operate in the market, and we have a particular set of knowledge, a particular, you know, we understand the market because like we hunt around for jobs and contracts and things.
Yeah, but I think that it never hurts to like ask, is what I've learned as well, because I'm definitely someone that tends to be a bit more passive, and you know, like if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And knowing your worth, knowing like that, like I think you have a lot of knowledge in general about like how to be business savvy as well as being like a good programmer.
So money aside,
dev or whatever,
is there like more specific things that you could call out when you're talking about business things? You're also talking about the way the teams operate and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I just mean things like having good long-term goals and stuff like that as well. You are quite like long-term thinking, which I think is really important, because I do tend to be quite sort of like, oh, where do I want to be in a year, and not where do I want to be in 5 years or 10 years or and I think that can be useful actually when you're first retraining as a dev. I think focusing on the next year is really good, because there's so much to do in the short term, but as time goes on, you need to start thinking more and more long term.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
That's been useful.
I certainly didn't think long term back when I was starting. In fact, compared to a lot of people, it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I'm thinking, all right, what's my longer term goals from 8 years of contracting? When I came out of uni, I was just like, hey, this programming thing's fun. Surely everybody wants to do this.
Yeah, I think there's only like so much you can do at once though, and learn, you know, becoming a dev is like really hard. And or at least it was for me. I think it is for a lot of people, and there's only so much you can do, and you're really focused on that, and that's good. And then as time goes on, you need to start thinking about like long term, like I said, and other things like that. So I think that's more like whenever we've gone for coffees or whatever, that's more the sort of things that I'm asking you now. Whereas to begin with, it was like much more code related or like, you know, that type of thing. And then like I still do that stuff like sometimes, and you know, like, Misha I'll go to quite often because he's been a Rails dev for God knows how long now. Decade plus, you know. So but yeah, I think that to begin with it was definitely much more like these small things and like understanding more about the language and just in general like programming concepts, and then as time's gone on it's changed.
You mentioned the coffees, like it felt to me like that was a good thing to do, was just to, maybe it would have been good to do it on a more regular schedule, but just like occasionally say, let's get out of the office and just have a catch up with no necessary agenda. But like, given that I'm pretending to be a mentor, like, is it, you know, how's it working for you, and what do you want to get out of it now, and do you want to pick my brains on anything? Like, how did you feel about all of that? Would you, like, with the benefit of hindsight, would you want more or less structure, or would you do anything different with that?
I think that like some structure can be good. I think that like I don't think that like, oh, we have to meet every week for a coffee and go over things is like needed or helpful. Yeah, I think having some structured goals in place is probably useful. And I think this is where, in some ways, hopefully, once there's more internal capability and there can be a bit more focus on like how you can improve the things that are going to like get you from a junior to a mid-level or whatever. Those things perhaps can be like more focused on. I don't know. Like I'm pretty happy with how it went, and I feel like, you know, I went from like an apprentice dev to mid-level in a year or whatever, year and a half. Like, I think it went pretty well. I think.
I guess I feel like when you're on that journey, there's only so much you can take in at any one point. So if you just like try and brain dump on somebody, I don't know, senior tech lead everything or architect everything, then it's just going to be, I'm busy learning this aspect of coding, come back to me in a year. So I guess it makes sense for it to be a little bit like, okay, I could do with a bit of catch up on this, or can you tell me more about that? It's like pulling the information out seems to be a better approach to me than like having a particular structure. But then maybe like it probably worked okay for us because the team we were in was so good, so understanding. And also even in the heat of, we have some actually kind of hard deadlines and some stuff we have to get done, still able to create space for team improvement. I think that's probably a bit of a rarity. And I think where the structure perhaps would be more valuable would be in the more average team, where when the pressure is on, everything goes out the window, including any ability to progress if you're trying to get up to speed. And that structure would allow you to defend that time and say, this is just what we're doing, I need to get to this, like defend those long-term goals at the expense of some of that short-term panic.
So I think that's definitely true. And I think I was just, while you were talking, thinking about it. So we sort of had a bit of a tradition on Fine that after stand-up, we'd sort of walk to the market down the road and get some coffee. And at least 2 or 3 days a week, I would walk and talk about the card I was working on and the problem I was having. And then you and Sal and Misha would all like pitch in, and like I would learn absolutely loads. And that would be sort of, I don't know whether you call it mentoring time or whatever, but I always had those opportunities to go through problems whenever I got stuck. So I think you're right. There was a lot less need in that situation for these sort of very structured mentoring where you have particular goals and things like that, because I had such good access all the time to like people who have so much experience. But I think you're right, actually, like on a team, I don't know, because I have such limited experience. I've only worked really there, so I've only had a very positive experience and had like very experienced contractors around me all the time who are like ridiculously skilled, who I could always tap into for knowledge. I think probably there is more and more need for structure. The less either people are willing to help you and take time, or like you said, that when the sort of rubber meets the road, I was trying to think of a nice expression, that they basically, you get sort of pushed to the side and they're like, well, no, we need to focus on this now. And even when we had tight deadlines, I was always given work that I could do that I still felt like I was contributing, you know, rather than just being like, oh, go over there while we do this. Even early on, like, I mean, rollover was that'll mean nothing to them. But like there was a tight deadline we had quite early on after coming back, and I was still able to sort of pitch in pretty well.
I think the team's approach to pairing contributed a lot to that.
Yeah, I think so.
Like for everybody, the knowledge sharing and like bringing everybody up to a better level. Yeah, just like we didn't ever mandate pairing, but it was definitely virtually the default. So when you slot into that, it's very different to off on your own in your own corner, like stuck, or off doing something that then the team is going to turn around and go, no, that's not how we want it.
I think I was also quite lucky because you and Sal were, .NET and learning Rails. So like while you guys were learning, I was learning, and that was really helpful because you'd run into problems all the time to begin with, like anyone does, right? When you first start learning something new, and then I'd see your approach to problem solving, and I could just absorb a lot of knowledge through that as well.
Cool.
So I think it was just a very fortunate situation.
Yeah, no, it was good times. I really enjoyed that time on that project. It was a bit sad to see the back of it, but 2 years is a very long time for one project for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to speak a bit about, like, now that you've got all of that under your belt, like you alluded to the fact that you joined on the team I was on, and then after quite some time and having really got up to speed and got to the point where you're delivering value, I think they pushed you a little bit to go over to the sister team with a different code base. And I seem to remember you telling me, like, oh, okay, it's quite different. Now I see why I needed to be over here.
Yeah.
So
they definitely didn't push me over or anything. They said, well, we've got new people starting. Do you want to move or do you want to stay? And I spoke to Misha and said, like, oh, what do you think I should do? I really like working on this team. And he said, oh, you should go because you'll learn a lot by moving to a new team.
Yeah, correct answer.
So it was, yeah, and it definitely was, like, really, really was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I found the fact that, like, that wasn't obvious to you was kind of interesting. Like, for me, like, you learn so much from each new project you go on, and like that is another piece of experience, isn't it? Like knowing that every project is different in meaningful ways and you can learn from them.
Yeah, because in my mind at the time, I was thinking, well, I'm on this team. It's a really supportive team, and in reality, I think I was getting quite comfortable, and I was when I moved across and did that, and even though they're both Rails, like they're just very different in approach.
Very differently.
Yeah, like very, very differently. And there are things that I really love that were on Find, and there are things that I really love that were on Apply, and have just being exposed to all these new ways of doing things. And also having to learn a new code base again as well. Like, it was really interesting. And the experience of learning it the first time to then going to a new project and learning it again was quite encouraging, actually, because I was like, oh, I have actually, improved a lot during that year or 9 months, how long it was. And I think actually moving on like a reasonably frequent basis every year or so is probably a really good way to improve it, like the quickest velocity or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a tension, because like the point at which you stop gaining the maximum value is relatively early in a project, because once you've done that, once you understand how it's done and maybe you've learned something from your teammates on it, you're always learning things, but it definitely tapers off. And at that it's kind of at that point that you're really delivering maximum value for the people you're working for, because nothing really surprises you. You can just run at any problem and get on with it. So it is a bit of a balance of like, how much do you exploit that versus how much do you pay it back, as it were. But the projects vary a bit. I've had some projects where I've been up to speed in a few days, and I've had other projects where it's literally taken me months because they've been complicated before I've even been able to contribute. Do you, I guess, how do you feel about the journey so far? And like, is that you sold on that as a career for life? And how much do you want to reveal about where you want to take it from here? Obviously, with some sensitivity to the uncertainty and.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like particularly secretive. That at some point I would, obviously Corona has massively hurt this, but I would absolutely love to get a remote job and travel for a while. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I haven't, like, there's no big rush for me. Like, I'm 30 now, and like, I'm not overly interested in the sort of kids thing. So I guess that is a bit.
I hope it didn't put you off.
No. But like, so I might change my mind, who knows? But there's no huge rush for me. But I would absolutely love to travel a bit. So eventually, I would like to do that. But
you see the programming as being the basis for that.
I think so. Yeah, it's the first job I've really enjoyed. I've never really liked. There've always been aspects of jobs that I've liked, but I don't remember the last time I got that thing on a Sunday where I was like, oh, I really don't want to go into work tomorrow. I just don't get it, and I occasionally get it if I've had like a week off or 10 days off, where I'm like, oh, that's work, which I think like you would get that in any job, but I really enjoy it. I'm surrounded by really, really nice people where I work, and I really enjoy the work environment. So that does weight into my, thinking on things like that. I really don't know where I'll be necessarily in like 5 years, or
it's a long time.
I wouldn't say I would definitely not ever think about contracting or whatever. Like, I think though that I've got a long way to go in terms of skill set before I even. I really don't know, I guess, job wise what I would be doing in 5 years necessarily, but I am pretty certain it will involve being a dev. Like, I do really enjoy it.
Yeah, the contracting, everything's changed now. Like, I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen as people start returning to work. I mean, I'm still not working, which is partly there really isn't very much around, and partly just being at home with the kids. It's after conversations with my better half, it's been the priority to stay sane and enjoy the time and the weather. So it's been really good.
Yeah, I think it's very uncertain at the moment, isn't it? So being a civil servant is not
no bad thing.
It's not a bad time to be a civil servant.
yeah, I'm not complaining, that's for sure. I'm in a decent situation. So is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
No. Thank you for all the mentoring and having me on.
My pleasure. So have you got your home on the internet sorted that people can go and find you? You've got a domain?
Well, I mean, I do have a LinkedIn, but that's about it.
So David Gisbey on LinkedIn?
Yeah. I probably shouldn't I? I should start my own blog like you've got. Tim Wise.
If you set something up, a Twitter or a blog or something, then ping me a link and I'll add it to the show notes.
Cool.
So people can find you. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure for me, and probably something I would have wanted to do anyway, even without recording for the wider audience. And I hope anyone listening has enjoyed it. So it's
great.
Good night from me.
Thank you. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, not at all. That's been really good.
Great.
So, thank you very much. And that wraps it up. Another episode of Software Should Be Free.